The following webinar on stage management mentoring was presented on Monday, January 12th, 2015 by the Stage Managers Association with the assistance of Propared. Propared is building revolutionary, cloud-based management software designed specifically for live event professionals. We would like to thank Ryan Kirk and Propared for making this conversation possible. Learn more about Propared by visiting propared.com. The Stage Managers Association is the organization for professional stage managers in the United States. In the fall of 1981, a group of New York stage managers held a get-together to meet their counterparts on the Royal Shakespeare Company's Nicholas Nickleby. That get-together was the inspiration for us to start regular meetings, at first on a social basis, then as an official business meeting in February 1982. In 1985, we incorporated as a not-for-profit professional business association in the state of New York. In addition to educational activities for the industry, such as operation observation, forums, chats, and seminars, we advocate and provide stage management networking opportunities for those working in the profession across the country. The following is part 2 of our conversation.
That's a really good segue. Stay on some of those same stories, but with different outcomes, maybe where whether the team makeup was just right, maybe there was a great leader on the team, maybe you felt like it was an opportunity to step up where you really sort of took advantage and really got a lot more out of that particular job in sort of creating and maintaining and strengthening mentor-mentee relationships. Maybe Ryan, if you want to take that first.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think for me, my most successful interactions and the ones that seem to produce the most value for me are when I drop those preconceived notions of what it means to be a mentor versus a mentee. You know, I find myself constantly learning, and even every day, everything that I do, I'm having these interactions and exchanges with people, and in any given moment you can be put flat on your back with something that you had never even considered before. Two of the people that I learned from the most right now are Mary Stazuski, who is my assistant at Tink, who helps with a lot of the coordination, and she's constantly bringing sort of new ways of doing things and new processes to my attention and things like that. And also with Propared, Caitlin Ackerman is the youngest member of our company, but her perspective into our software and into the workflow is completely different from mine, because I learned to manage during a different time period with different technologies. And it's incredible how, if you can kind of step back and remove yourself from any kind of I must be this person and that person must be a certain person, how much you can begin to glean from any type of situation and relationship.
Well, what you're talking about there is really rejecting any notion, no matter how minor, of any sort of hierarchy in terms of relating to the people that you work with.
Yeah, no, I think that's a huge part of how we try to build and structure our internship programs and mentorship type relationships. Our one of the things we really try to harp on is that you can learn things in any situation, no matter who you are, and you have the opportunity to teach things in any situation. I was in high school as a senior in high school, passing things that I had learned on to sophomores and juniors in high school. I think about where I was then and how much I didn't know and how much I've learned since then. But even in that situation, I had opportunities to exchange knowledge. So I guess that takeaway for me is just to, stay humble in a lot of ways.
Mandy, what about you, having jumped from really sub industry to sub-industry, across the board. What did you find was a really great experience that you sort of then apply to, where you go from here?
Well, I think that one of my most, well, I guess what I strive for on any team that I work in, and like Ryan said, it doesn't matter if I'm the assistant stage manager or if I'm the calling stage manager or if I'm just a PA or I'm a production coordinator, whatever my role is to learn from everybody. And I always try, especially if I'm the one that's in charge, is to make everyone feel like you're a team member and this is like the stage management team. And no matter who does it, it's got to get done. So whatever that job is, and I'm not above or below any job. So, if I tell you to do something, I would do it as well, but I'm also managing. So there might be a reason I told you specifically to do it. So I try to always, like Ryan said, be humble and know that everybody brings different things to the table. And sometimes you're trying to get them to expand their skill set, and sometimes you're just trying to get the job done. And it kind of depends on the situation. And I think it's taking advantage of those opportunities and the people that are around you. One of the best opportunities, I've had a couple in my life, that the internship at Juilliard, which got me to New York, and I learned so much about, not about stage managing, about life and about how to be a stage manager in New York City and then how to survive and survive off very little money for a long time. And that was a great life lesson. Juilliard was also a great place to learn about stage management and about personality management. And then taking advantage of other opportunities. When I left Cirque, or my show closed, actually, the production closed, I was still technically an employee. And so I flew to Vegas on my own and emailed all the stage managers that I had never met, but I had their email addresses on my Outlook. And I emailed them and I said, I'm never going to have this opportunity again. So since I was still technically an employee of the company, I wrote them all and I said, I'm going to be in Vegas for a week and I want to come and I want to watch and I want to sit in the booth and tell me everything you know and how you guys work and how you do your daily schedules and all these things that I had known and done by myself in my own world and had never had an interaction with another stage manager other than the two stage managers that were my assistants on the show. And suddenly I got to see their teams work, and they're much larger shows in Vegas if you've ever seen. So there's teams of 6 or 8 stage managers on any given day. And so it was fantastic, and getting to listen on headset and just see their interactions and see how they do everything that I was doing, but just differently. And the same thing, as soon as I moved to New York, I had met a lighting designer from my school who actually graduated, and he just, I guess out of the same concept, wanting to pass on knowledge, invited me to come to a tech. And he was teching a show at Radio City. And here I am, 21 years old, right out of college, and I get to sit at the tech table at Radio City. And I just remember thinking, this is the coolest thing I've ever done. And granted, I was in no position whatsoever to be offered any kind of jobs with any of these people who were 20 to 30 years ahead of me in my career. But to still sit there and listen as to where I could go and how they were doing it and see the principles that I had and that I learned and see the core group or the core curriculum that I had in place and being utilized was an amazing opportunity. And it's things like that that you need to go and constantly strive to do. This year I was kind of bored, and I was kind of taking stock of who I knew and discovered that I knew stage managers on Broadway. And I was like, I've never stage managed Broadway, so maybe I should call them. Maybe I should check that out. And so I randomly wrote the people that I knew and ended up being able to shadow on a couple of Broadway shows this season. And it was fantastic, and it was fun, and I hadn't done that in several years. So it was actually a really great opportunity. And now I've reconnected with those people and also started to open doors about possibly subbing and stage managing within the Broadway circuit, and that's also very, very exciting. So it's from these opportunities and looking around and kind of digging in within yourself and who you already know that you then can take your next steps.
It really doesn't necessarily matter we're talking about it for our industry, but it's such a great thing to share with anybody in whatever industry they're in, and that you have a certain set of resources, and the very first thing you should do is really be tapping those resources as best you can. We're getting some really fantastic questions, and I want to make sure we address them because they're really, really Great. So what I did here was cobble together what I thought was some of the key takeaways for both mentors and mentees. Some of these, have already been covered, but I want to sort of pick both Mandy and Ryan's brain about a couple of these. And first with you, Ryan, I'm just going to kind of go out of order. I really would love for you to touch a little bit on this idea of getting your head out of the book and rethinking about what your role as a manager is when it comes to engaging with your team.
That's a great question, and it's again something that I think about constantly. Again, when I first learned how to stage manage, the first thing that I learned how to do was put together a prompt book or make a schedule or something like that. And that was sort of where you began. And as I began to actually practice it, of course, as many of you know, if you've done this before, is that it's that's only a small part of it. There's so much more, and the human interaction is where your job gets done. In fact, I'll go so far to say as the paperwork that you produce is just an output. If my job is to communicate effectively to you, I need to create a piece of paperwork that works for this current situation. And sort of as Tink began to grow and we began to do more and more types of events and things like that, you come to realize that there is no one set template. There is no one set, this is how a schedule must always look. And it's okay, these people need this information to be communicated to them clearly in such a way. Therefore, here's how I'm going to present it to them. That might be paperwork, that might be something else. And so I think for me, it's the communication and the leadership are the absolute most important points of being a successful manager. And for me, that was only reinforced when I went to business school and I started taking very, very formal management courses that actually took the theater out of management. And I came to realize at that point that it doesn't matter what you're doing. You're being armed with a set of skills as a manager that can take you so many places.
Mandy, for you, we were actually talking about this earlier today. You threw this idea out about sort of teach as you go, and I love that concept, and I wondered if you could just really briefly just expand on what you mean by that.
Realize who's around you. There's kind of a good and negative side to this. Don't be condescending, and don't pretend or act as if you know everything. That is not what I want you to do. And in fact, that will get you the opposite reaction amongst those around you. You have to be aware of where people are, and it's acting natural. And if people are interested in your paperwork, I've often looked at other stage managers' paperwork and been like, oh, that's an interesting schedule. Why did you do it this way? And looked at it and gone, things are great. And like Ryan said, you come to realize that for certain productions, maybe the fanciest schedule isn't going to actually help them. And in fact, sometimes you find the opposite to be true. The simplest things are what people actually want because it's clear and less distracting. And even though I just created this amazing Excel database and blah, 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 and I can link this, this, and this, and then I'm done in 3 seconds, maybe the actors or the performers can't read it because it's too small. There's actually too much information. So how do you assess the situation and then give everybody what they need? And teaching as you go, for me, is a constant ask questions. Ask the stage managers around you how you think it looks. You don't have to be teaching. A lot of times, we teach all the time and we don't even realize it. So it's kind of a hard thing to answer because it just happens organically.
No, I think what you're identifying is right. It's not necessarily about well, let me sit somebody down and explain this is why I did things, but to sort of present something to somebody and solicit their feedback, and engage them in the back and forth so that you're teaching by perspective sharing. Someone's able to say, oh, well, I find this really helpful, and somebody else is able to say, I find this really helpful. And the idea is to ultimately get down to how do we do our work as best as we can, and how do we spend less time in our own little bubbles focusing on our sets of tasks and more time sharing that information amongst ourselves.
Exactly. I love what you just said, teaching by perspective sharing. That I had to pause it so I could type and write that down. That's fantastic.
We put together some takeaways for people being mentored, and we got a question in that is actually a really great question that sometimes I wonder too. What basically is the difference in the professional world between a production manager and a stage manager?
I can do a high level. Ryan might want to add a little bit to this, but basically, when you do a theatrical production, you have the stage manager, and the stage manager is ultimately responsible for the actors in rehearsal and getting the communication going, and you are the liaison between all kind of technical departments. Um, and so you are on one level just within the show. The production manager is a little bit higher level, and they are involved with they're going to do all of the location scouting and making sure you have a venue, making sure that you have a staff that's hired, and then you, the stage manager, are then communicating with all of those staffs and working within that venue, working within that rehearsal hall. And that's a very broad definition of both of those. And within those jobs are a lot more little responsibilities, but that's an overall definition. Ryan, add to that, please.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the shortest answer I can give is that it depends. Depends on whether you're doing theater or industrials or a fashion show. You know, every little nuanced type of live event has its own sort of underlying understandings of what those two roles are. But I think Mandy basically had the gist of it. The stage manager is responsible for what goes on the stage, you know, and anything entering that stage, the stage manager has purview over. The production manager, again, is you know, you think about the production as a whole. So you think about budgeting and staffing and sort of getting to that point where you can turn over the stage to the stage manager. But if you'd like to chat more about that, Cassidy, we can certainly talk later.
There's a couple people that wanted to know, I know you touched on it briefly, but maybe just a quick recap. How did you both break into professional stage management production out of undergrad? And do you have any specific recommendations about how to make that transition into the quote real world?
For me, the thing, and I think I've already said this once, but I'll just reiterate it. You know, the thing for me was two things. One, sort of recognizing that the skills that I was learning were much more useful than I was originally thinking that they were, and that for me opened up a lot of possibilities into the types of work that I could potentially be qualified for. You know, and then the second for me was you know, again, you come back to this idea of you know, communication, you know, and when you're a young freelancer, the importance of not being afraid to go talk to anybody was huge for me. You know, just it did not matter. Following up, checking in, chatting with people on site, taking people out for drinks or coffee. You know, it's now that I'm kind of on the other side of that, it's incredible to me how little I see that, you know. And I think there's this, you know, when I was doing it, there was this kind of underlying fear that was like, oh, I'm going to bother people, or, you know, I'm going to annoy people or things like that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't work that way. You know, we're always eager, just as eager to teach and show as we were to learn when we were in those positions as well. So, you know, for me, those are my two big things.
Absolutely. That all of that is very important. You know, you take advantage of those that are around you and who you're working with. It goes back to the whole principles of taking advantage of what resources you have in front of you. But how do you get those resources? And there are lots of places to start out and how you get jobs. You know, I got my first job by going to a theater conference and interviewing, face-to-face interviews with these companies that I had never met before. And I interviewed with, I don't know, many companies at this conference, and so that was the Southeastern Theater Conference, SETC. There's also USITT. There's plenty of also web organizations and web job postings that you can look at. Stage Managers Association is one of them. If you are a member of the Stage Managers Association, we send out job postings so you can meet or you can get those jobs emailed to you directly. We also do social events. We also have an Ask a Stage Manager section, and now a mentoring section, which is what has sort of inspired this whole panel and what we're trying to do with getting people connected and how you make those connections. So you join any networking opportunity that you can. You find these websites that post jobs. There's playbill.com, there's mandy.com, there's backstage jobs, there's lots of things. There's art search, and some of those you have to pay for, some of those you do not. And whatever is right for you at that time. And then meeting these people, going down to the stage door and dropping off your resume at that theater, whatever it takes, get in there.
This question is for you, Mandy. You touched a little bit on, the difficulty in getting to the next level. For example, you work on an off-Broadway show, you want to move up, but the only people you know are also in the off-Broadway world. So what advice would you give to somebody that's looking to make that transition? Where would you go? What's the first point of contact that you might reach out to try to make that next step?
Well, it's the same thing, like if the stage manager and you're the other assistant, or perhaps it's just you and the stage manager in the same world, you guys have just stage managed the same show, so you're kind of at the same level, but that person that you worked with was the calling stage manager. Well, find out what that person's experience was and how they got there. Ask the production manager who might have hired you to do this job and is also hiring all those other people. Perhaps he's working on another show that he needs a stage manager for. Your last job should get you your next job, and that should always be the trajectory that you go on. But also keep in mind, apply for things, even if you don't think you're qualified. Someone once told me that they would rather have a person that is inexperienced but they enjoyed working with than someone who has all the experience. And if your personality is the right fit for that production or that company, they're going to hire you. It doesn't matter if you're the most qualified person or not. You have to be somewhat qualified, but they want somebody that they can speak to, that they're having fun with almost, because we have the luxury that we, for the most part, really like our jobs and want to be there. And so when there's someone that you're working with that doesn't want to be there, you don't want to work with them. And I know I hire a lot of freelancers for now my company, and if I know that they're not going to be happy on site, I don't want to hire them because it's not fun. We're going to be working really long hours, and I want someone that wants to be there, and I want somebody that's happy. So that was told to me when I was very young, and they said, I want to hire somebody that maybe isn't so qualified, but I would sit in a truck for 3 hours with them, and I could actually have a conversation with them. That's who I want to be on my team. So don't think that any job is above you and or below you. You never know where it's going to lead to. I applied to be a Cirque stage manager when I was 21, and I was like, I'm totally qualified for this, although I wasn't, but I went for it, and eventually it led to me getting a job there. So go for it. Don't stop yourself.
I think we probably have time for one more question here, I'm going to sort of tag team this a little bit, and then I'm going to get Ryan and Mandy's perspective on this. But a couple of people have also asked questions that have to do with still in school, not based in a school that's in a sort of major city, especially a major city for events, different ways to sort of break into corporate events. Where can I go to try to break in? People worried about perhaps being a little bit too young, and feeling like maybe there's people that are more qualified than they are or anything like that. So I'm going to put my business hat on real quick. I just pulled some of this stuff together from my role as sort of doing marketing and stuff like that I wanted to share with everybody. One of the things that's really powerful nowadays is obviously all our social networks. And beyond looking at cat videos and sharing BuzzFeed lists about the 15 most amazing pictures of people on carousel rides of 2014 or whatever fancy BuzzFeed lists there are actually a lot of really amazing things that you can glean out of social networks. And basic searches can really get you some of that stuff. For example, Facebook has a lot of sort of city groups for stage managers or production professionals. beyond just our larger organizations, people sort of create groups to network for themselves, and a lot of them are really active. Specifically, ones in Chicago or New York, or even out in Los Angeles, and just start with some basic searches. Start by sort of mining your networks of people that you know online, because you might know more than you think, and that's especially true if you're on a more professional business network like LinkedIn. There are so many industry groups that just rise up as an opportunity for the community to find ways to get closer, and that's really what we're talking about, over this hour and change of our session this evening, is ways to bring the community closer together through creating deeper relationships through mentoring. And there's lots of industry groups that are as specific as audiovisual freelance technicians, production professionals, various other kinds of specialized skill sets that you can really just do some basic searches for and request to join the group based on your interest. LinkedIn also has the ability to really show you how connected you are to people that you might be interested in. You can search for people with job titles that you want and try to find if you have a common connection and reach out to that person and say, can you make an introduction for me? I too, sort of like Ryan, went to business school despite having an undergraduate background in sort of theater and performance, and it's amazing that's all that business school is about utilizing the power of your network. But somehow, for theater and entertainment professionals, we forget that that's probably even more important for us, to maintain those contacts and maintain those connections. So I would offer that as a recommendation. Now to get super like marketing and kind of slightly stalkery, although it's not quite stalking. You can, for anybody who uses Instagram, Instagram, just like Twitter, you sort of hashtag everything, right? So if you search for certain hashtags that are interesting to you, like somebody who hashtags stage managers or event professionals or live events or production, whatever it is, you will find people that are posting that type of content that might be interesting to you, that are on tour as a touring production manager or head carpenter on a first national tour of something. And you, again, can then utilize the rest of your network to say, who do I know that knows that person? And if they're going to be in my city, maybe we can make an introduction and we can grab a cup of coffee. One of the things that I found working at Blue Man for so many years is that I was always amazed how generous people were with their time, even though I never thought that they would be. I always thought everybody was too busy to make time for each other. But if you ask, you'll really be surprised at how much people are willing to go the extra step to assist you, especially if they were assisted in getting a leg up in their own careers.
Yeah, I mean, I think just as to kind of put a button on this, I would echo what you just said, and also kind of come back around to this idea of think about what makes our industry unique. Think about what makes you unique. One of the things that we learned in business school is that one of the most important aspects of having a new product or a new business is to be able to differentiate it from other products and other businesses out there. Well, you're no different. What makes you capable and qualified to do your job better than anybody else? Those are great things to think about as you begin to reach out. Again, some of these questions revolved around kind of how do I make those connections better. I think any of these are great resources, but also remember that you yourself are an amazing resource for getting yourself work also. So that's
Mandy?
That's it for me.
I agree with exactly what you just said and what Ryan said, and looking to what you have, and especially like with the way that social media is. However, just keep in mind that whenever you make a connection, just always remind the people of why you know them and how you got their information, because it can also be very intimidating for someone on the other end to just get a random email from a stranger and be like, hi, I want to shadow you. Okay, who are you and where did you come from and why are you interested in me and what what is it that you bring to the table, and what is it that you want to learn? Always have that in mind, because people are going to be more likely to help you and get you to where you need to be if they have an idea of what it is that you want. Um, and for me, that's the kind of, going back to the whole structure of mentoring, where I have kind of issues with it. Is like, well, what is it, the expectations of that relationship? And so putting those expectations out there is a great introduction for what it is that you're looking for, especially if you're contacting someone you don't know, or maybe you got their information from someone else. Just make sure you put all of that in a very friendly, open way and say, I searched on LinkedIn for stage managers in Omaha, Nebraska, and your name came up. And to answer the question that you said was posted about how you get in to the industry when you're not in a city that is, so readily available with production companies, and it's not in New York City or it's not in LA. Well, I'm from Raleigh, North Carolina, and it's funny, I went home, I think it was last year, and I was running in a marathon, and I saw this truck, and it was a production company in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I remember thinking to myself, really? There's a production company here? I mean, and obviously there has to be. There are live events that happen. There are concerts that are put on. Find out who's coming to town. Find out what tours are coming to see you. Constantly, I got emails from strangers when I was on tour with Cirque saying, I looked up, I found that you were a Cirque du Soleil stage manager for this show. That show is obviously in my town. I'm a student. I would really like to come visit you and see the backstage and just talk to you about stage managing and career paths and things like that. That's completely acceptable as long as you go about it in a very professional and open manner. Don't be the creepy stalker person in the corner, saying, I saw you and whatever. Just always explain yourself, and 9 times out of 10, they're going to invite you. And I invited plenty of students backstage whenever I was in town, anywhere. So that's how you get those resources, when they come to you. And then if you are visiting the town, say if you want to move to New York or you want to move to Chicago, look into those social networks and see who you can meet up with. The chair of the Stage Managers Association, Ellen Marie, she's fantastic about meeting people, and constantly, whenever she's in a city, because she's working there, she tries to reach out to those that are in that town and whoever wants to meet her. So it's a give and take relationship, and that's how you get into the industry when you're not necessarily there. Take advantage of when the shows come to you.
I think is a lovely button to end on, that just to sort of wrap up with the idea that we have more power to affect things for ourselves than we might think. And I know that sounds kind of cat postery, hang in there. But the truth of the matter is that those resources exist, and we hope that I hope that we've been able to sort of illuminate some of them for you tonight. And I know that there's a couple of specific questions that we didn't get to right now. We will be following up with you. Make sure of that. There are also some great resources in this overall slide deck that I highly encourage anybody to look at. Mandy spent some time putting together some stuff for the Stage Management Association. Of course, Ryan has made himself available through Propared for any conversations to share his experience. And so everybody who attended, we will be sending you a copy of the deck, and we will make the recording available as well. And if you have any further questions, these two amazing people have kindly offered to answer them as best they can. So Ryan, Mandy, thank you so much for all your advice and experience this evening, and thank you to everyone who attended this evening. I hope you enjoyed yourself and got something out of it, and hopefully we will host another one of these in the future.